Hi everyone, welcome to week 10 of qualitative research for the health professions. There are no additional readings this week. However, I want to go into a little more detail on data analysis and the specifics for your interview assignment. And I would encourage you to refer back to last week's readings and review them again. So there are 3 key steps that you'll need to complete for the interview assignment, in addition to actually doing the interview. The first is transcription, then the initial coding process, and then creating your code book. For transcription, really what you need to do is just create a written copy of the interview itself. At the top, you want to include the date of the interview, the location it was conducted, the name of the interviewer, which will be you in this case, and your participant's ID. We usually don't use their names because of confidentiality issues. Now, the next part, this is the most challenging part of the transcription, is actually doing it. It's the verbatim text of the interview. So you'll need to mark when the speaker changes. So in this example, the interviewer is A, and then the participant is service member 7. And you can see in this initial exchange how their speech is marked and switches over. You'll want to remove in your transcription any proper names or identifying information about the participant. So they may refer to the name of a family member or something that's just detailed enough that would give their identity away. So we want to remove that whenever we see that. You also want to use continuous line numbering in your document because it makes it a lot easier to find the text when you want to refer back to it. So the coding process, this is kind of where the magic happens. You can do this either with a hard copy document or electronically, for example, in a Word document. I've done it both ways. It really just depends on your personal preference. Of course, there is qualitative coding software available, but for this assignment, I would not recommend making that investment in time and your resources because it will take you a long time to learn how to use it effectively. So I recommend that you read through the entire transcript once, and you can make some notes to yourself as you have ideas about the text, but before you go into the actual coding process, I recommend just an overall read through. And then start going through again and marking chunks of text and generating codes. You'll want to focus on those chunks of text that address your research question. And you can use color coding. You can highlight either with physical highlighters or in your Word document. You can use the comment function and to mark the ideas as they come across. And basically, you'll go through the whole document at least one time, usually multiple times, to complete the initial coding. This is an example of coding. So once you've done that initial coding, you need to create a code book. And for this assignment, I'd like you to use the format that's in the Saldana text. So you'll create a table. You can do this either in Word or Excel. And you'll put the raw data in the first column. So that's the exact quote, the chunk of text. You'll use your preliminary code, so whatever your first code that you came up with in your initial coding. And after you do the first round of coding, you'll start to merge and refine codes. So then in the third column, you would put the final code. Now for your course assignment, you don't have to have final codes. You just have to have the raw data and the preliminary coding. Include the line numbers from the raw data so that you can easily refer it back to your interview transcript. Now, if you have a project where you were doing multiple interviews, you would also need to include the participant ID, but for this purpose, since we're only doing a single interview, you don't need to do that because we'll know what the source is. So just reminders as you go through this process, this approach is inductive coding. You're generating codes from your data rather than having a predetermined framework that you're trying to fit the data to, which would be deductive. We're focusing on inductive. And how you group your codes and categories of data depends on what your research question is. So using even the same source, we could come up with some possibly different codes if we have different questions about it. And as you recall from the Papadimitriou et al. Article that we looked at last week, even having a very small chunk of text or even a small encounter with approaching it with different theoretical perspectives can produce very different approaches to organizing and understanding the data. So just keep that in mind, that there's not a single right way or right answer. It really depends on what your point of view, your theoretical foundation, and your research question are. Here are the references this week, and I look forward to your questions.